Thank you all for being here this afternoon. We have a great panel of two really smart people who are doing amazing things with data. First off, we're going to start off this session by hearing from James Gray from Phunware, which is an integrated services platform that enables brands to engage, manage, and monetize their mobile users. Funny story about James. He came here last year as a prospect and actually signed the contract that evening. So for those of you who are not yet clients, be like James. After James, we'll hear from Wynne Leung Kim, who leads audience strategy at IBM to deliver programmatic marketing and decision-making analytics. Fun fact about IBM, they have 380,000 employees worldwide, and we are fortunate to have one of the best and brightest with us today to talk through how IBM structures their data, team, organization to make audiences the foundation of their business. First up, we've got James. So James, take it away.
Are we on here? Well, thanks for the opportunity to share some of the things that we've been up to over the last year. And I'm going to stand outside, or at least here, because unlike Andy, we share a similar haircut, but not the height. So I'm going to stand out here. Do I have a clicker? Where's the clicker? Yeah, here we go. Okay. So a little bit about, okay, my slide looks a little different. A little bit about Phunware. We were founded 9 years ago, and the company bet the company on native mobile experiences. And over the last 9 years, we've built some of the biggest mobile apps for some of the biggest brands in the world, as well as live events such as the Olympics. And as you can see in the picture, data is at the center and is the heart of our company, where we use data to drive, engage very personalized mobile experiences, but we also use that same data to drive targeted media on mobile. My aspirational state, I run the big data team, and this may seem a little bit odd. This is the one metric that I use to kind of measure the success of where are we really driving the data culture. From the data team, it's how good of a job have we done describing our data? How good of a job have we put it someplace where the people in our media team can really activate on it? And it was a year ago, with this same thinking, that I needed to give tools to our media team so that they, self-service, could create audiences at scale without any of my help. And if I'm selling data externally, how easy is it for brands to understand our data and also taking advantage of it? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the journey that we've been on over the last year, and it really started about getting very hardcore around our data. Every single attribute, every single field, describing that in detail. And then also measuring that data quality. We see between 800 million and 1 billion mobile devices a month. Every day we process over 5 billion events on our big data platform. And so we see a lot of the data. And it's not only that data in isolation, is that how is that data really connected? And over the last number of months, we've kind of matured that into a formal ontology about what is our data, how is it connected, and what does it really mean, so that a machine can really interpret it without a human. And then a year ago, it was like, well, how do we structure this? How do we give people the targeting hierarchies that allow them to use the data to, again, create those audiences without any help from our big data team? And then it was, how do we connect the people? You know, what you see, and Andy talked about this a little bit, and I don't know if you in the back can see that, but there's kind of 4 circles there. It was our sales team who were out understanding the needs of the brands that we work with. It's the data team, and it's our media team, and finally it's Lotame. And Andy talked about it a little bit. We have over the past year have been meeting for 30 minutes every week since we signed that deal a year ago. And it's been this team working together and understanding the needs of the business and being very focused around the data that we need to deliver really rich experiences in driving the targeting and the audiences that our media team is really looking to reach. And that team actually is co-located. So, in terms of how did we organize ourselves, I'm in Austin, and we literally sit together, right? And so the people who in our media team are able to understand, and how do we improve their level of understanding? How do I understand the campaigns that they're looking to run? And then how do we make them power users, right? I said when we became a customer, if I'm the biggest user, that's a problem, right? And I kind of look at where we were a year ago, and when we do engage with Media Weekly, it's a couple, 3 or 4 key members of our media team together with me, who ultimately work together literally every single day. Okay, and then from the last piece is then how do we connect it to something that can drive value, right? We've connected our data, we've connected our people, and it's this last piece around using this data to enable our media team self-service. And so our team does that today. I thought of it around Phunware extending our data platform with Lotame. And so now we have our media team, they understand all of our data, they create custom audiences, they run targeted media across multiple DSPs. We couldn't do that a year ago. We had tons of data, 800 million devices, right? But the fact that we have people now who are trained in the process, in our data, are able to do that really at scale. And then the next piece that you see in the picture there, we use that same data to deliver engaging, personalized experience on mobile. So we're using that same data, using data and data science to really deliver a personalized experience on mobile. And then the last thing I would kind of leave you with is that, like I said, we get tons of data across many different sources, and the thing that we kind of matured was having some internal dashboards around, well, how much data do we get? Where does it come from? What's the data quality? How many uniques do we have? Where's that data come from? What's our footprint in certain parts of the world? So being able to have some dashboards that allow you to easily understand the data is really essential, because when you think about it, you've got inputs, you've got kind of the sausage making, and then you've got the data, but it's really that data product that we use both internally to drive engaging experiences. We're also a data sales partner of Lotame. And so let me leave you, and this was the picture that I wish I had a year ago, which is, how do we structure our data? And so really, really quickly, again, we get data across both apps and media. And at the top, our personal data, our demographics, and if you're our customers, go into Lotame, and you'll see our personal data. We have data by life stage. We also have geographical location data, as well as interest data, consumption, a rich hierarchy across all the apps that we see devices at, and then finally using that to become more forward-looking around targeting people through intent. So I could talk for probably hours on this picture, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you, James. Thank you, James.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That was great. I can't wait to dive into that more once we get into the panel. All right, Wynne,
Okay.
You're up.
All right. Can you hear me? Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about IBM. We're a publisher. We're a marketer. We're all in B2B. We're all technology. So when we try to sell puppies, when we try to sell segments on cars, luxury items, they say no. How about firmographic? How about technographic? How about CIO? How about job title? We're like, oh man, what are we going to do? Oops, hold on. The best data in the world right now doesn't sit in a database. You can't query it. We're actually starting to create it, right? We're starting to own more and more of our data as a publisher, right? So we started out. So this is kind of and the next slide, and I think that there's a Lumascape guy roaming around, right? So we have a Lumascape chart. But when we started, no one actually owned their own data. It was just kind of out there. We did branding, right? The CMOs did branding. No one had their own system. Then when we started to generate a little bit more data, we said, okay, well, let's optimize it. Let's optimize it in the systems, because these are tools that we just really don't want to own. We don't want the expense. Then we started owning pieces of it. We started downloading some of it into Excel spreadsheets, right? We started buying keywords. We started optimizing on Excel spreadsheets because we kind of needed to figure out better pricing. We needed to find better placements. We needed to figure out whether our creative was working, right? So we started to bring some of that data in, and it was sitting locally in our dashboards, right? Not even dashboards. It was sitting locally on your laptops, right? And then we started to bring in warehouses. Holy cow, look at where we are now. We have warehouses. We have multiple warehouses for different types of data that we're starting to pull together because the CMO is interested in performance. They're interested in accountability. They're interested in driving scale because they understand how marketing data drives product experience. That's incredible, right? So I think the smaller companies certainly get that because that's how they build their business. But for large enterprise businesses, this isn't the way that they've been doing business. They've been doing handshake deals. They've been doing upfronts. Right? So all the way on the left-hand side over here, this is how we've been doing media buys. This is how we buy television, right? So all the way to where we are now, these start looking like investment systems. This is how we trade stocks and hedge funds, right? We are that complicated, right? Let's talk about complication. Thank you, Lumascape guys, for keeping this up to date, right? So this is how the rest of the world sees us, but it makes perfect sense to us, doesn't it? Right? We know exactly how to navigate this. Kind of, sort of. But we do make it a little bit more complicated for ourselves. Why? Because we want to push more. We want more. We want better targeting. We want better people. We want better quality, right? We want this faster. We want messaging strategies that actually work. We want users who engage us, who buy products from us. Well, how? How do we do that? Right? How do we do that when we get in our own ways, when we silo our data? When we have users who are totally schizophrenic because they change jobs. Why the hell would you change jobs? Right? It makes us harder to target you. So we have challenges as B2B marketers. The data that we're trying to merge online and offline with our products, with our marketing, right? It's nearly impossible. How do you make that stitch? Not totally impossible, but it's nearly impossible. Right? It's really, really difficult, especially when you're working with companies who have been around for decades, centuries, right? So when we start to approach this and we have different owners, right, it kind of looks like this. Every man for himself. We try to sabotage each other's businesses. We try to kill each other's data sources. We try not to have the same language. We try not to build each other up to have the same story in front of the client. Well, who suffers? Because we can move on to better jobs. The user suffers. Our end users, our buyers suffer, right? And that's not what we want, right? So James talked a little bit about how do you structure your teams? Well, this is kind of how you structure your websites. This is how you structure your data. The smaller data sets you have, the simpler you can have it's a very simple solution. If you have 5 data sets, you just kind of string them together and it's 5 data sets. What if you have 100? What if you have 100 plus your second-party data? What if you have 100 plus your third-party data, right? So then what needs to happen? You need to flatten that out. You need to figure out how you can matrix your environment, not just your data, not just your content, right? Not just your experience, right? Your teams, your organizations, your data, they all need to follow suit, right? So that co-location piece of it, IBM went through a pretty co-location transformation of our own. And we started moving people into the same space. We started moving the data into similar warehouses. We started cross-stitching everything just to try to pull it together so that we can have one cohesive story, right? So that storyline has completely changed the way that we've been doing marketing. Audience is the foundation of everything that we do now, right? So we're about a year old, similar to Phunware. And when we first deployed an audience-first strategy, it was like, okay, well, I want to talk about my product, and then how do I get the right audience for my product? And that's like, no. Actually, we have to start a little bit further back, right? We have to start talking about the user. What do they want? What are they trying to solve? Who are they? Where do we find them? What do they do? Right? So we start talking about behaviors. And we start talking about what kind of rules of engagements do we have, right? How do we govern ourselves? How do we govern our data? What's acceptable, right? Where do we find them? Who do we need to partner with in order to find these users who are validated, who are good quality users that we want to get in front of with our message? Do we have a common language around our data? Because once we have a common language, we are so much more compelling and we are so much more cohesive. And do we have the right channels? Can we engage in the right way? Can we connect the dots for the users so that that experience is seamless? And that's kind of what we're about. So the person who grasps principles can successfully select their own methods. And the person who tries methods without principles, ignoring them, is sure to have trouble. So I'm going to try a quick exercise. I can't do it, but you can. You have both your hands. And we're going to clap. We're going to clap once. And it's not supposed to be pretty, so don't worry. Right? And then we're going to clap again, but we're going to clap twice. And then we're going to clap 3 times, and let's see if that cadence actually comes together. Because the theory is there's a synchronicity to how we work together. Right? It's actually in nature, right? This is a theory that's in nature. Like, you know how like the ducks, they fly south for the winter and they, make a perfect formation? How when horses gallop, sometimes they gallop at the same speed, right? They're a little chaotic, sometimes they bump into each other. But they do find the cadence. And so can we try that? Can I see both of your hands? Ready? Let's clap once. That's pretty good. Let's clap again. Okay, hold on. Now let's clap 3 times. Do it one more time. Ready? Go. Okay. You see how this comes together? We find rhythm. We find synchronicity because we're all in the same space. We're all sharing the same data. We all have the same rules of engagement. And so how do we find that cohesiveness? And my parting thought is, how do we work together to push for that progress? How do we push for that connectivity because we understand who the users are?
Thank you, Wynne. That is certainly one way to get an entire room clapping for your presentation.
That's good.
Let's totally play that way, but yeah.
I've got a few follow-up questions for you guys, so I'll just dive right into it. James, I want to start off with you. How does data relate to what your company does, and how does it inform your company's strategy and execution?
No, that's good. I think if you look at the picture, right, that I had in the beginning, data's at the center. And I would say, we go out of business. We really do, right? We're using that data to deliver really rich experiences on mobile, taking that same data and using it for media. We're also getting into cryptocurrency. So, it's an exciting time for us to really, how do we use data? And it really being, I'd say a year ago, instead of leading with data, we were kind of leading with a lot of the other things. But now every story that we're telling with an engagement with the customer, it's all around how do we use data, right, to deliver differentiation, especially in places where the technology in itself might be, commoditized.
Absolutely. When you have a pretty large team and a large company with a ton of resources, how do you guys structure yourselves to go from 0 to 60 on implementing a robust data strategy within your organization? And what would you recommend for people who don't have the resources of an organization like IBM's?
Well, more isn't always better. So when we deployed the DMP last year, we introduced it and we basically rolled it out, and it was a strategy that I think a lot of you have experienced. You stand up your first-party structures, you figure out where you need to go, you figure out your best use cases, and you just go, right? And so we kind of went out the door and we did that, and then we heard pin drops. And we were like, okay, what the hell's going on? Right? Why isn't anyone responding to us? Like, why isn't anyone coming into the platform and asking for more of this information? So it was really important for us for a couple of things, right? One was we had to get executive sponsorship, right? So we had to push this strategy top down, right? But we kind of had to prove ourselves. So part of proving ourselves was choosing a couple of selective use cases and getting those really quick wins, right? Telling a good story, right? Once you can tell that story once, you can tell it again. You can tell it twice. You can tell it 3 times, right? Once you start telling that story, you get other people to tell that story, right? So then it goes viral, And next thing you know, we're completely bombarded with all of these requests, and we just don't have enough hands to do the work, right? We started building audiences, and poor Brian, I mean, he was kind of building thousands of audiences at a time for us. I think he was going to kill us. But then the next thing you know, we had teams who still didn't know what to do, because then they were relying on us to execute for them, right? And we don't want to be that bottleneck.
No.
Not at all, right? Not at all.
I don't want anybody to talk to me.
Right. So we basically said, okay, well, how do we empower them? How do we enable you, right? And so how do I clone us into you? And how do we make you uniquely you? And so we started doing that. And we started training teams and making practitioners and making experts within these little hub of environments. We found a couple of champions in each of the spaces, on the analytics side, on the creative side, on the content side. And we just started creating little replicas of people who could pull together strategies like this. And that's key, because you can't put the stress on your team, and you can't do all the work. You can't be the bottleneck.
Absolutely. James, can you talk through who you sort of hired on your team to make sure that you were able to make sure that your data strategy was going across your organization?
Yeah, and I think Lotame was critical to that, right? We kicked off our project, and we were and Lotame helped us, right? Identify who were those stakeholders, right? Because like I said, I didn't want to be the biggest user. That was going to be a problem. And so, we went through the initial kickoff, we did the training, and these 30-minute calls that we have every week, where the media team, data, Lotame come together and do business, is really, really critical. And then, at the end of the day, the people who have to create those audiences and actually deliver on that media, right? It's not me, right? It's the people who are in that media team, right? And so, if I look about a year ago, how much media were we running where we were really using our data? And I was here a year ago, right? We didn't have a DMP. It was very, very little. We don't do anything. I wouldn't say we ever, but the majority of everything that we do is all targeting. We could not do the things that we're doing today without data. So it's like a non-negotiable, right? It's essential for those people to do the work, and instead of me pushing, they're the ones who are pulling her out in terms of like, what is the data? Do we have this? Can we run this campaign? Do we have enough reach? Are we able to target that, right? And that's just an amazing discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. James, you had pulled up an image of your hierarchies.
Yeah.
I want to hear from both of you what you wish that you had known when you had signed up with the DMP from the get-go.
Do you want me to start, or Wynne?
Whoever wants.
Yeah. I shared that picture because I'm a total picture person. And so I think that's kind of a work of art. I think it's a work of art. It's my little art project, because it always changes like every day and every week, and people inside the company don't know that. But you have to give it a lot of thought about the people who are not data people, and are they easily able to interpret what those hierarchies are in ways that they really understand, right? And so there's a lot of thinking that kind of goes into it. I wish maybe I just had maybe a straw man saying, hey, these are the different ways that you should think about your hierarchies. And think about like, how do they stand the test of time, like the 6 that we have, and then they've kind of stood that so far. And then it's always refining of what those hierarchies are. So and Lotame obviously helped us get and then looking at how other people structure data, right, throughout the platform, that gives us really kind of ideas. Ooh, we didn't really think about that. And then just having means to, right, just keeping that rich and fresh and evolve based upon what the needs evolve to.
I think what would I have wanted sooner? I think I should have identified, if I were to do all this again, I would have had probably a dozen or so use cases lined up. And I would have prototyped them.
Yeah, that's good.
And done quick prototypes, as opposed to who's willing to do this. And I would have insisted, right? I would have done it for you. And I think when we first started, it took us a month, 2 months, 3 months of just talking to people and just going on a roadshow and just introducing it. We should have just prototyped it, right? You don't actually start to take full advantage of all of the things that you can do until you just dive right in and you just do it. And you know, it's. I think we were waiting for the right ones because we wanted to be selective. We wanted to be. We wanted it to be right. We wanted it to be the right time. But sometimes it's about, you know, just dive right in, go for it, right? That's how you learn how to swim.
Yeah. Are you able to share some of the use cases that IBM has sort of utilized that you maybe would have started off immediately to really accelerate those efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I think because it's uniquely B2B, and because and IBM's very, very unique, they're very, very old school, right? They buy lots of email addresses, and you're like, why are you buying email addresses? and why do you only want to target CIOs? Like so they're if there was a way that we could have attacked hey, like, let's get you in front of the CIO, the IT buyers. You know, let's do a walk, let's do a tour, right? Let's evolve what you would have done now, right? And so I think one of our first use cases was certainly one of those. It was, hey, like, how do you do this now? Like, we know you buy an email address. Can we mimic some of that, and can we bring that online and let's do this programmatically, right? And then we said, okay, well, now that we've changed your programmatic buy, right? Let's change some of your web pages. Right? Let's personalize it, right? So let's push into a couple of different systems, so that way we're creating an ecosystem of IT buyer users, right? And so when we started doing that, then that story actually it just started to make a lot more sense.
Yeah, very interesting. So we tend to think of our client adoption on a crawl, walk, run, fly maturity model. Where would you guys put yourselves on that scale today?
I would say, we've been in it a little bit of a year. I'd say we're just walking, right? I think about some of the things that we want to do and take advantage of capabilities that exist in the Lotame platform that, are still opportunities for us. And so I think we've got a lot more interesting things to do. And when you think about the data maturity in your organization, that's something where it just needs to kind of continue to grow and strengthen. And I kind of look at it, the questions that I get, right? Because we get lots of questions, like, how many devices do we have here, right? And so I look at it, what are the quality of the questions? How often are the questions? And are people able to answer those questions themselves, right? Because they can go into the platform and it's like, hey, it's there. Kind of go figure it out. Instead of giving them the answer, hey, go out and build yourself a custom audience, right? Look at the reach, right? Go in there and look at overlaying of all the other demographic data, right? So I would say we've come a long way, but we're still walking.
What do you think is next in terms of getting yourself to that next level?
I'd say we still have, a lot more work to do around the data side. I mentioned we're doing a lot of work around connecting our data so that we can derive a lot of other interesting insights out of it. And how do we really harness that data at scale and using some other technologies such as graphs and others that allow us to become more intentional and more predictive around people who we should maybe look to reach. So, we spent so much time on the data side that, and I have a data science background, so we need to get to do the data science piece, right? And that, to me, where it'll just kind of unlock a whole bunch of other interesting things, and we have to get the data right before we move on to that.
Great. Where do you think you fall, Wynne?
I think we're at the tip of the iceberg. I think I'd be lying if I said that we were any further along than just getting started. We are just getting started. Mm-hmm. So I think we've stood up some pretty good things. I think we've managed to sit up and build a good foundation. Mm-hmm. We're just starting to deploy the way that we would like, and we're starting to get better at it. We don't suck as much as we did. That was my goal. Don't suck. And I'm going to suck less this year. But I think we're just getting started.
Yeah. And what do you think needs to happen in order for you to reach the next level?
Scale. I think the scale of how we do the strategy, how we roll out the strategy, how we take over some of the strategies, top down. We have to completely dismantle some of the approaches because, we talked a little bit earlier about, how if you can go after the user experience and understand what the product experience really should be about the user, right? Your marketing completely changes. Your messaging strategy completely changes. The way that you present yourself is no longer about your product, about your solution. This is about what can we do together? And so that mindset is just a completely different approach.
Yeah. And how do you think that aligns with your overall business objectives?
Perfectly. Yeah, that is the only way to do business in the 21st century.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, then why would users come to you? They have a lot of options, and if you are not resonating with the solutions that they are looking for, because they are trying to bring in the next generation of tools and services and solutions, if you are not helping them solve world hunger, we're not part of the conversation.
James, I know that you mentioned that data is crucial to your business. Anything else that you wanted to elaborate on that with?
Well, I think the needs are always changing, right? I'd say when we were here a year ago, it was, how do we get our data into the DMP? How do we also become, a data sales partner? But if I look at a lot of the brands that we're working with around or having opportunities to work around, how proficient are our people who are not the data people telling the story? Like for me, it's the best experience if I go out with our sales team and they're talking about the solution and I just sit there where I'm not the one who has to talk about it. So I think there's the whole maturing of the organization itself, as well as how do we get in front of the next data needs, knowing the types of questions and some of the problems that customers and brands look after, because by the time our salespeople say, oh, we need that, like it's going to be too late, right? I always need to be kind of thinking in front of them a little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely. You guys are great, but our time is almost up. So I want to just pull up some of the key takeaways from our session. Going deep on your audience definitions, organizing a cross-functional team, standardizing your data, and humanizing your audience. And as Alex mentioned, we'll get these over to you so you have them. James, Wynne, thank you so much.
No, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you.